to be clear, in this conversation alone has not been ever happened in the health travel. Like this is monumental in the travel healthcare space, which is good. And I hope it creates more conversation. But it's because, again, it kind of comes back to like what I said earlier about transparency and control and power. It's like keep the information behind closed doors so that they create this persona of, well, travel healthcare is beautiful and we're all here to help you. And so, but there is definitely an underbelly here.
I'm Nurse Jessica Seitz.
And I'm Nurse Erica.
And we're Nurses Uncorked,
the podcast that takes nursing facts
with nursing comedy and makes a cocktail out of them.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts. And please rate, review, and download.
Also, if you're interested in supporting Nurses Uncorked podcast and getting early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes content, and bloopers,
check out the Patron link in the description of the podcast.
Before we get into this week's episode of Nurses Uncorked, I wanted to give a big thank you to our newest patron with Nurses Uncorked, Morgan. Welcome to the patron community, and thank you for becoming a sponsor of Nurses Uncorked. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. We couldn't do it without you guys. So let's get into this week's episode. All right, this week we've got Nurse Erica. She's here. Can you believe it? I mean,
episode 70-something, still here.
I think it's 76 or 77. So myself, Nurse Jessica, Nurse Erica, we're at it again. And we're joined by two more guests today. And today we're going to be covering the topic of travel nursing. Whew, what a broad
exposing
world.
Travel nursing.
So first, I'd like to welcome our first guest, and then Erica will introduce you our second guest. Our first guest that we've got with us today to talk all about the travel nursing world is Andrew Craig. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you for coming on Nurses Uncorked.
Thank you for having me.
Andrew is a registered nurse with over a decade of diverse nursing and recruitment experience. Licensed since 2012, he's worked in multiple settings from critical access to level 1 trauma centers, specializing in step-down and medical surgical care. Andrew's nursing background spans various roles, including inpatient, long-term care, nursing leadership, and outpatient triage. Currently, Andrew utilizes his clinical experience in healthcare recruitment, focusing on placing nurses and radiology techs in various positions from travel assignments, permanent positions, and per diem positions. Welcome again.
Joining Andrew today, we have Marian Weber, a registered nurse with 10 years of clinical experience. Prior to nursing, Marian was in the Navy, worked in offshore diving in the oil field, and as a diver medic. And side note, was maybe or maybe not a geisha girl in Japan at some point, but that's a story for another day.
That's another podcast.
That sounds like a good one.
Technically, it was called a hostess. Geishas,
a hostess,
a little higher up. Yeah.
She was on her way to the geisha.
Right.
I did not see this one coming, let me tell you. That was a long time ago.
That's
another life. Exciting past, yeah.
Marian started in nursing as an LPN, working in med-surg, pre-op, post-op, ED, LTAC, and rehab. Now as an RN, Marian has been a traveler working in critical care for the last several years. She travels the country, often working in remote locales, where she can be found kayaking with whales and dog sledding through polar ice caps. You may be familiar with Marian as a whistleblower who successfully took on Peace Health for wrongful termination and set an important precedent for travel nurses. Marian will be joining us on an upcoming future episode to discuss her inspiring story. But for today, we invited her on the podcast to lend her expertise and input as a travel nurse on this very important subject. And full disclosure, Marian is a good friend of mine. And if you are an avid Nurses Uncorked listener, you may remember a long time ago in a previous episode where I said, in the hypothetical world where I'm president of the United States and I get to pick my cabinet and have to surround myself with the smartest people I know, I said Marian. Marian was one of them.
I thought it was me. I thought you.
It is you. No, we decided you were the press secretary.
What the hell?
Remember?
All right, I'll field all the questions. It's fine. Yeah.
Erica, you're
Okay.
setting me up for failure here. You know that, right?
No,
Once you
no,
say
no.
I'm the smartest person you know, the next job I go on, they're going to quiz me about specialties I know nothing about. ICU nurses, especially, we are a toxic bunch. They're going to ask me about impellas and balloon pumps and be like, "See, you're not so smart after all, are you, Marian?" You know. You know it, Andrew. Nurses are toxic. ICU nurses, we are a vicious, vicious lot. So it's on. We'll see
There's
what
truth
happens.
I
in
don't
that.
know what you're talking about. They've been very kind and approachable and understanding, and in my entire experience working with
You
nurses.
sound like a recruiter, Andrew.
Oh my
Right.
goodness. I think we need a drink on that note.
Yeah. Let's have a drink. What do we got today, Jessica?
Well, today I got creative because every week when we try to come up with a drink, I'm like, I have all these ingredients like in the cabinet, and I'm like, what can I make with all this? So I downloaded one of those apps that you can type in the ingredients that you have. I forget what the hell it's called, Mixology, and it will spit out different drink options, and that made it way easier.
Awesome.
I think they should sponsor us. Um,
Yeah.
and anyways, I came up with today a blue whiskey crush. I mean, it
Because
looks
we're still trying to get
beautiful.
through that bottle of whiskey you opened.
Yeah, I obviously am not that big of an alcoholic because the whiskey's still there. So a blue whiskey crush, it is mixed with 1 ounce blue Caraco, which is where you're getting the blue color. It's like a blue syrupy something. 1 ounce lemon juice, a splash of club soda, 1 ounce simple syrup, and 2 ounces of whiskey, and then garnished with a lemon wedge. And I'm going to try it because it's been staring at me for the last 15 minutes, and I want some.
It's pretty.
So cheers, everybody.
pretty color.
This is the blue whiskey crush.
Cheers.
Oh, that's
Love
good.
it.
Really
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yes.
All right. Okay, let's get into some questions here. So a little prologue of what to expect or why we decided to do this. We wanted to tackle the often misunderstood and, dare I say, corrupt travel nurse industry because this is something that affects so many nurses. Nurses will inevitably face challenges with agencies at some point because there's always going to be a fundamental difference in priorities between the mindset of agencies and the mindset of clinical nurses. And we did take a poll asking people to send us questions that they wanted answered from travel nurse recruiters. So we will be going over those questions in the podcast. But first, let's start with Andrew. Once you became a travel nurse recruiter and learned kind of the inner workings of the industry, do you now have a better understanding of how distrust develops between travelers and recruiters?
Like you mentioned in the beginning, there's definitely a difference in mindset between what's important to an agency and what's important to clinicians. And so what I've realized is I just really wasn't prepared for working in an agency because I came from a clinical background. I have no business training, so seeing how agencies operate is vastly different than how a nurse operates.
Well, let's go to Marian now. Marian's next on the chopping block. No, I'm just kidding.
She can hold her own, trust me.
She's like, "You damn travel nurses and your Louis Vuitton bags."
Yeah, I'm like, let's see what I can throw at Marian. No, Marian, why did you decide to become a travel nurse? What prompted you, and when did you start that, I guess?
Okay, so I originally started traveling in state in 2015 as an LPN, and then I started traveling out of state in 2016. The only time, as a matter, I never stopped traveling. Even when I staffed up as an RN in ICU to get the necessary experience, I was still working agency travel jobs in the States, right? Because why? Not enough pay. I was a nurse in Louisiana. The pay is embarrassing. It's absolutely abysmal. And, that's the largest reason because you're never going to make the financial gains in your life on staff pay. I don't know about California. They seem to have a decent wage, but then again, the cost of living is high. But everywhere else, it's very difficult to get ahead in life financially, pay off your loans, and be a good, producer, and supporter of your family on staff nurse pay. And we know that. So that was my biggest reason. Second to that was working in toxic units, toxic hospitals, right? all the way from how your unit operates and how we treat each other, and to just, the way the hospital treats you as a number. And so at the time, of course, I was like, I'm leaving this toxic hell and I'm going to go travel the country, only to go from toxic work environment to toxic work environment to toxic work environment. So it was interesting because you definitely get an insight that, it's kind of crappy everywhere. But so those were the biggest reasons: money, try to get out of a toxic environment. And of course, I love to travel. So it was an opportunity to go to other places that I ordinarily would not have the opportunity to go to, especially on staff nurse pay,
Yeah. Bill rates are a huge issue for travel nurses. Andrew, can you kind of break down what a bill rate is for us, and who comes up with the bill rate, and tell us why it's such a big secret?
So the bill rate is what the agency charges per hour for the clinician working on their unit. So I'll just use $100 an hour just for simplicity if we get in a deeper level, like breaking that down. So for every hour the nurse or the rad tech works at that facility, the agency charges the facility $100 an hour. And so the primary reason why that's secretive is because it maintains a competitive advantage of the agency. So for instance, if agencies blasted their bill rates out to the public, like their competitor could say, "Oh, I saw that agency A is doing it for $100 an hour. I can come in and do it for $98 an hour." Now, I know that that's not necessarily ideal for travel nurses that want to have a better understanding of their pay, because they want to know where those dollars are going. At the same time, the agency, has to, in order to operate, to pay for their expenses, to have profit, to stay in business, the bill rate is that advantage. So in terms of like who chooses that bill rate, it varies depending on if it's a direct contract with that facility or if they go through an MSP. An MSP is an organization that's between the agency and the hospital. And the MSP usually dictates that rate. There's almost zero negotiation that occurs there. If you work directly with the facility may have a general idea of what they'd like to pay to staff that person, but there's a lot more negotiation power from the agency to determine that bill rate. So the facility may say, "Hey, we'd like to pay 50." Well, the agency may say, "Yeah, we can't do it unless it's 55." So there's a little more back and forth there. In terms of the bill rates, generally speaking, about 25% of that goes to the agency, and then 75% goes to the traveler. Now, there's a lot of nuance there, but that 25% covers all of their business expenses, as well as paying their internal staff. Then the 75% of that bill rate to the clinician is going to go to them in form of stipends, hourly, taxable rates, as well as other perks, benefits, 401k, and so forth.
So, Andrew, where you're working at, what is the bill rate? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just.
Yes. So you want me to get killed? Is that what?
I'm just kidding. I had to throw a little icebreaker out there.
Yeah, perfect. So if I disappear tomorrow, you know why?
We would not ask you that, Andrew. That would not. That would not. That would not be fair. Okay. I'll give you a break here. Let's go to Marian.
Okay. Thank God.
Marian, as a traveler, do you have any thoughts or questions about what Andrew just explained? Does that, the bill rate and all of that, does that,
of course,
spark any questions in your mind?
And hell yes, obviously it does. Probably one of the biggest concerns we have as travelers is this lack of transparency about how we get paid, all right, and the differences that exist. And when we, question our recruiters, depending on the kind of recruiter that we have might have a recruiter that gaslights us. We might have a recruiter that's more transparent and is willing to have a conversation. So for instance, I think it's apparent also from Andrew's answer that agencies do have quite a bit more control over the bill rate than they'd have us believe. at least in previous conversations I've had with recruiters.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, with a recruiter, I'll be like, why did my rate get slashed? I'm driving en route to this job and you just slashed my rate by $1,000, a week. And then they're always going to say the hospital controls that. And that might be true. Yeah. And that might be true sometimes. But there's just, we know that they have a little bit more control, and we never get the answers, that I think that we actually deserve. And I'll keep in mind, I used to be an entrepreneur. I owned a business prior to, for whatever reason, I decided to become a nurse. But, so I understand things like competition and not like wanting to say what the bill rate is, Andrew, like you pointed out. I do understand that. And you guys don't trust us as nurses to keep our mouths closed about the bill rate, because you're right not to trust us, because we won't, because we like transparency and pay. Are you ready? Are you ready for a little exposure? So there was a time I had considered, with a good buddy of mine, a fishing buddy of mine named Lou, who was also a travel nurse, and we had entertained the idea of starting our own travel agency. And so we stumbled across the practice of profit margin elections. And a lot of travel nurses don't understand this. What this means is that the recruiter can elect a certain percentage of the bill rate. And what we mean by that is an agency is going to tell the recruiter, okay, with this bill rate, the minimum percentage we're going to accept, could be 10% or 15%. But there's no cap. So if that recruiter is able to negotiate gets a travel nurse like me who doesn't know about this practice to sign a contract, and they elected a much higher profit margin, and this has happened, and this is why it particularly bothers me. I have signed a travel contract at the same time as another traveler. So let's say today at 3 p.m. I sign a travel contract, and another traveler at the same agency with a different recruiter signs a contract at 3:15 p.m. for the same hospital. We start at the same day. We have the same shitty orientation of half a day. And, we're in the same department doing the same thing. One of us has 5 years more experience than the other. And that would be me. And I'm getting paid several $100s less a week than that traveler who has less experience, who signed the same contract. Everything's the same all the way through, and they're getting paid more. And there's this thing because, the recruiter does have the ability to say, well, I want to do a 30% profit margin on this contract. And if they get the deal done, that is a win for the agency, because at the end of the day, these agencies are sales agencies. And some of them are clinician owned. Many of them are not. Many of them can be private equity, it's corporate structures and recruiters, Now Andrew's different. So I do appreciate Andrew a lot. I follow him online and I see him actually trying to bridge these gaps and be a good recruiter. But the majority of recruiters aren't coming from a medical background. I tell them, please don't send me on a CVICU contract. And they're like, I didn't. I submitted you for a CTICU. No clue it's the same damn thing. Right? And I waste a whole day going through an interview and prepping. And I'm like, wait a second, why are you asking me about balloon pumps and Impellas? Haven't touched those in years. Yeah. But it's like, it's this lack of transparency in this practice, especially of these profit margins, that I don't think a lot of travelers realize. My issue with it is there's no cap. So there's no transparency about the practice, and there's no cap. Do you really think that I would believe if you said, Marian, there's no way a recruiter is going to negotiate for a 40% profit margin? They're just not going to do that because it would be unethical. Would I believe you? At this time in my career, having traveled for a number of years, the answer is no, I don't believe that, because we're very much capitalist society. It's money, money, money. And these agencies are going to reward a recruiter who keeps more money in-house. I mean, that's at least one issue I have with bill rates.
No.
Hey, let me give you an example of why I left the last recruiter. I asked the recruiter about this, the recruiter where this happened on this job. And do you know what that recruiter told me? He said, I don't worry my head over things. I don't worry about things that are above my pay grade to worry about. Contracts are what they are. And if you're happy with that current contract and you sign that current contract, that's all that you should concern yourself with. And I was like, you know what? This is my 2 weeks notice. And that's the end of that,
Good for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Andrew, did you want to respond to Marian?
Yeah, I do. I wanted to take a little sip of my bourbon.
I've driven a recruiter to drink. It's not the first time.
Right.
Your work here is done.
Right. The reality is, Marian, all of that is true. There's no way. The problem is agencies do not want the full picture out into the world. I'm not really sure why. My guess is probably to appear constantly as they don't want to hurt any feelings. And when I agreed to do this, I knew that I would probably piss off somebody. Either it's going to be agency, it's going to be a traveler, it's going to be an MSP. Because no matter what I say here, it's going to upset someone. But regarding your statement there about profit margins and the ability for recruiters to increase them per their discretion is 100% accurate. I can't speak for the 1,000 agencies out there, but it's been my experience based upon my 2 agencies I've been at, as well as other recruiters, that recruiters have that leniency. And so, assuming everything is the same, the bill rate, the agency, the only different, and the burdens or the expenses the agency incurs, everything is the same job description. The only difference is the 2 recruiters. That's the difference. And so recruiter A could say, I'm going to opt for a 15% margin, and recruiter B could say, I'm going to opt for a 17% margin. And they both get those travelers to sign. So that's true, Marian. Like what you just described is accurate.
All right. Well, I want to thank both of you for your transparency. This is good. This is a really important conversation.
Thank you, Andrew. Actually, for being transparent. That's rare.
So the question is, how does that feel as nurses, knowing that a recruiter does have that discretion in opting for profit margins? And you mentioned, I wrote down the cap component. I suppose it's possible that a recruiter could say, well, the agency's minimum margin's 10%, but they opt for 50%. I suppose that's possible. There is some transparency and comparison of rates across job boards. I don't think a recruiter would be able to get away with something that egregious. But if it's the difference between 1 to maybe even 5% between travelers, I think that's totally possible. But I'm curious, like, what do you think? Like, it would make me,
when I go to meet the recruiter, I'd go in like this with like a stank eye.
I'd be not trusting them. Yeah.
Yeah, because you want to know, hey, what
how much are you screwing me out of to pad your own?
How much are you taking out of my hourly rate? Yeah, exactly. That.
Just to speak as a travel nurse to that, I understand it's a sales company and that is a way to incentivize the recruiters. I get that. I have to take my travel nurse off and put my entrepreneur brain on. But how does it make me feel as a nurse? It makes me very angry. And the reason why is because these non-clinician recruiters that are electing these profit margins, it's just a random election. They're not looking at the nurses or the clinicians and going, you know what, this is a very experienced clinician. You know what I'm saying? So like, I'm not going to elect a higher profit margin. And I'm not saying either way is good, but it's really hard to sit at a job doing the same job in the same unit as someone else. And especially if you're a more experienced clinician, but the other traveler is making considerably more, it does affect your attitude on the job, which incidentally can be said about staff nurses. Staff nurses really don't appreciate when we come in and we're making a ton of money.
Oh yeah, and we'll get into that. Drinking. Sure.
Yeah. And it's like, so I get it, but it's just there's no method to the madness of these profit margins. There's no we're not going to do, they don't care that they're overpaying an inexperienced traveler and underpaying an experienced traveler. It has nothing to do with that. And that, that burns, and there's no transparency and a cap. I think there should be some sort of regulation where if they are electing these profit margins, there's some sort of cap that at least we might not know what they're electing, but we know they're never going to go above this. I don't even know if that's possible, but this is why we don't trust. There's a lot of distrust between recruiters and travel nurses. This is one example. Yeah.
Makes sense.
I wanted to interject here. I think it's important to say the opposite is also true, that recruiters will actually advocate for clinicians to take a lower margin to close the deal. So let's say you have someone that wants to stay with you, but the rate just isn't, aligning with their expectations. So, let's say the minimum margin for the agency is 10%. In order to sign that nurse or clinician, for whatever reason, it needs to be at 8%. I have had many conversations with my recruitment manager that said, hey, I need to take 8% in this instance. So I think the opposite is also true, that there are good recruiters out there that do advocate for clinicians in that respect too. So
Situational.
I
Yeah.
acknowledge that.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like you might
So-
be one of those recruiters, Andrew.
I'm definitely here. Yep.
So, Andrew, what should a traveler do if they experience what Marian was describing? If they signed a contract the same date and time and started the same time on the same unit for the same company, but are paid differently than another traveler? What recourse, if any, do they have?
Let's assume everything is the same. They sign at the same time, same facility, same job, same agency, but different recruiters. The simplest solution is approach your recruiter and say, hey, I spoke with my friend Marian. She's getting $2K a week. I'm only getting $1,800. What's the deal? The right thing to do is to match that. So what would happen is the recruiter would go back to the recruitment manager and have a conversation, and it is possible to get that deal updated. Just because they say it's like it's signed in blood or it's signed in stone, that's not really the case. Anything can be updated at any time. It's whether the recruiter's leadership is agreeable to allowing you to do that. So the recruiter has no say on post-signature updates per se. Like, they can't do that without the recruiter's involved, or the manager's involvement.
All right, I've got a question for Andrew. What is this practice of non-billable training modules and orientation hours that are required, but that the traveler doesn't get paid for?
Yeah, this is definitely a problem in the industry. And
He takes a big sigh.
Flip it.
Here it comes. Here it comes.
Here we go. We're just going to sit back.
Travelers and clinicians should never do work that's unpaid, period.
Amen.
So if you're being expected to do anything work-related, I mean, there are certain things like going to a drug test. I don't think you should be paid for that. But if it's like a module that's part of training, absolutely. But the crux of the issue is somewhere along the line, the concept of non-billable orientation hours came to life, where this is not something that I've seen in the direct route where an agency works directly with the facility. This is an MSP thing. And so what part of working at certain hospitals, the agency cannot bill for a certain number of hours. And that can be as low as 4 hours, or that can be extreme examples, 40 hours. And so the time frame where before the assignment, but they're considered an employee, that onboarding part, a clinician may be asked to do certain tasks, modules, for instance. And some agencies are trying to expect clinicians to do that on their own time without a compensation. That time,
That's insane.
agencies can't bill for. So non-billable that's what this not like agencies cannot bill for that time in a lot of instances. And so an agency isn't in a hurry to pay for something that they pay a salary for something they can't bill for.
But wait, tell them why they can't bill for it.
Sipping my tea.
No,
Popcorn.
I mean, it's not like this is a law that says, there's nothing out there that says agencies can't bill for the orientation. So there's an agreement that throws us under the bus. Because if you're staff, you're getting paid for those freaking modules and all your training time. But as a travel nurse, I could spend 8 to 12 hours on these freaking modules as just part of my agency onboarding or my next contract onboarding that I never get paid for. So saying an agency can't bill for that, yeah, there's an agreement. It's not like that, because and I need to dig into this more. I haven't really gone into the wage theft or wage, appropriation kind of issues in my legal nurse consulting, but there's a very gray area here about, not paying us for expected training modules that are required to do the job. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's cool. The reality is non-billable orientation hours are a thing. And agencies are not going to like to hear this, but it's, in my opinion, the right thing to do. Even if you can't bill for that time, say 8 hours or whatever, the traveler should be paid, is the bottom line. And the agency's going to take the hit. That's just the right thing to do. even for the traveler, for the clinician, even though it's not financially right for the agency.
Why is it written that way? Why is it not
It's
billable? Like,
whose fault is this?
that's a damn good question. And it's not like agencies agencies don't want this. They hate it. It always, because if you can't bill for something, it's automatically going to reduce your profitability of that deal. Somewhere along the line, someone convinced hospital systems to do a cost-saving measure for their staffing that, yeah, we can provide this clinician, and cherry on top, the agency can't bill you for, let's say, 20
We need
hours.
names. We need to know who that is.
this is, you know what I feel like? I feel like
Right.
somebody was in there and they were about to lose the hospital. And they were like, I tell you what, I will.
Let me dangle a carrot.
All the orientation, I'm throwing it in. It's going to be free for you. If you agree to use us, I could see that happening. And then from there on out, they were probably like, well, these other people did non-billable module hours. Oh, I guess, well, shit, we're going to have to do, I guess we're going to have to do that too.
I
swear, it sounds
unacceptable.
Funny, but
I'd be so pissed if I had to sit there doing all those modules and not getting paid. I'd be pissed. Yeah.
I think Jessica's picture of how this happened is accurate. I feel that's very accurate.
Yeah.
Seriously.
It's a damn sales trick, whether it was an MSP or some big ass agency that was like, we're just going to undercut our competitor. We're just not going to pay our nurses for these training. Fuck them, right? We're not going to pay who cares about the clinicians?
The hospitals, all they care about is money savings.
Yeah.
So that's
and
the bottom line.
agencies to keep the client and to keep profit within their agencies. And then we're just over here. And believe it or not, you guys, travel nurses will throw each other under the bus on those stupid so-called support groups. They'll be like, oh, it's just 8 hours or 12 hours. Just do it and suck it up. And I'm like,
oh my God, really?
What? Who are you? That
these
is
are
like, yes,
these are the same nurses.
Me.
The same nurses that are like, I'm just going to clock out and keep working so that I don't get in trouble. Those are those nurses, and they are part of the problem. So we've heard the term MSP thrown around a couple of times, and I've been researching MSPs lately and their effect on the travel nurse industry. And frankly, they're dominating the market, and I don't think people understand what they are and why it's problematic. So Andrew, can you kind of briefly explain what an MSP is and how they affect agencies and travelers?
Yeah, I'd love to if they actually told us what they do. Whoa, okay. Definitely going to disappear on Monday for sure.
No, this episode won't come out for another week or so. You're okay.
I've got time to get my will in order, my affair. No. The short of it is, hospitals are not good at managing hiring and staffing, and so along the way, the concept of the MSP was born, where they said, "Hey, we'll help you with your staffing. And as a perk, we will pass on the fees primarily to the vendors, the sub vendors, the agencies that are helping us fill your posted needs." And so they are an organization.
Tell them what MSP stands for.
Managed service provider. Most recruiters and agencies would not be caught dead publicly frowning upon MSPs, because MSPs are essentially a gatekeeper between the agency and the healthcare system. And so without working with the MSP, the traveler or the agency cannot get a traveling job to that hospital system. And you mentioned like domination of the market. Presently, about 80% of the market is controlled by MSPs.
80%.
So you're almost forced to work with MSPs. Now, there is some value to MSPs. I'm not going to completely shit all over them. They make certain aspects efficient for the healthcare system. But we have found some less than desirable experiences with work.
So, Andrew, you said that most recruiters or agencies wouldn't be caught dead kind of outing or talking about MSPs. So I have to ask, why are you talking about it? Why are you willing to talk about it?
He's like, I
He
don't
was
know.
too stunned to
I
speak.
don't-
He's thinking about the ramifications, and does he have an out, a new career path?
That's the thing, honestly, that just I am lucky right now to work for an employer that supports transparency. It's clinician owned. They know I'm going to be here. It's like legacy. It's like we only live once, and I want to look back at this and say that I had the courage to have a conversation about these issues. So when my son looks at this someday, he's going to say, you know what? Dad really took a chance, but you know what? It's worth it, because sometimes you got to take a chance to do the right thing. And I may not say it exactly perfectly as of this conversation, but I'm here. And so that's how I feel. Is why I'm doing this is because it's the right thing to do.
As someone who is also always walking the line of saying things that could result in my termination, I applaud you, because I know that is a difficult thing to do, and it takes courage, and nurses, frankly, are very often lacking in courage. So I applaud you for that.
I appreciate that.
And when you're both fired, y'all can look for a job together.
Honest to God, I was going to be like, do you guys need some more podcasters? Like we're going to...
I'm going to make this next question for Marian a two-part, because one came to my head. But first, what are your thoughts on MSPs? I want to hear what you think about it. But I also want to know, do travel nurses talk about their salaries amongst each other? Like, yeah. But answer the first part, since we're segueing from what Andrew said.
Absolutely. MSPs suck. All right. So let's just point it out.
No, what do you really think, Marian?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you how they came about, though. And I don't know, and Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong here, because he probably has to work with MSPs. For me being a travel nurse, I just suffer because of them, right? Because if they're taking profit away from the agency, that's essentially taking pay away from me. Okay. You have hospitals that absolutely suck, right? Because they can't adequately staff their hospitals. We don't know why they get it wrong. I mean, it's pretty simple. Pay your employees, take care of them, give them a safe environment to work in. It's not that difficult, you guys.
Yeah.
But these MSPs, basically, you have this HR department in a hospital that's just can't be bothered to adequately staff their hospital. So now they need travel nurses. But they equally can't be bothered to deal with multiple agencies. I mean, God forbid they do their job. So an MSP comes in and it's like, you don't have to deal with 6 different agencies to staff your hospital. We're going to be that middle ground. We're going to create this system where we're getting money from both of you, right? Andrew, they do get paid for the hospital?
I honestly don't know. I believe...
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do.
I feel like they would. But just in case we're wrong, then what we'll say is they charge an agency like Andrew's agency a fee, because now they're managing that entire health system, right? And if his agency wants to put nurses there, then they are charged a fee to go through this MSP, and there's no control. There's no control over this fee. There's no regulation that says an MSP can only charge up to 3% or 5%. I mean, they can increase the rates at any time. And then so you have MSPs that are just MSPs, and then you have agencies that are also MSPs. And I mean, I'll go ahead and say it because I work for Aya, don't fire me, Aya, but you guys you're kind of known for this stuff. You come in as a main service provider, and all of a sudden everybody that's on contract with a smaller agency can either come over on yours, which happened to me on an extension contract, right? Or we're going to get paid less. So if let's say I'm with Andrew's agency, but Aya is a main service provider for this health facility, they're going to put their people there first, and then they're going to fill it with other smaller clinician-owned agencies, except we're going to make less because they're going to be charged a fee amongst other things, and that trickles down to us getting paid less. It's complete bullshit. But the problem is that they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they already control 80% of the market. Like, we really have no control over the situation.
Is that not a conflict of interest?
100% a conflict of interest. if an MSP has their own internal staffing agency, the best stuff is going to, best and the internal is always going to get the stuff first. Whatever they can't fill will trickle down to their sub vendors, the small agency that's contracting with them to have access to that hospital.
To get the leftovers.
There's definitely and there's this claim, essentially, and there's this claim that there's a vendor neutral and non-vendor neutral where, and I don't want to poo-poo on every MSP because they're not all created equally. There's some good ones out there. But the non-vendor neutral, or the ones that have their own internal staffing agency, there is definitely interest because their agency internally is going to get the jobs first, and they're going to have them for weeks. So again, so you think about like the ramification of patient care, that delay causes patient care delay, as well as the help that's needed at the bedside isn't coming as fast as it could. I'm trying to be as PC as possible before I, so I don't get assassinated. But
yeah,
it's been great, guys. I've really enjoyed our talk. And so
we appreciate you. We do. So gossiping, Marian. Do travel nurses talk about their salaries?
100%. Yes, yes. And we should talk about them. Let's be honest here. Oh my God. And then, again, let's talk about the toxic nurses. Let's talk about the poo-poo nurses or whatever. You'll get nurses that are like, never disclose your salary. If you signed a contract, you should be happy with what you
right
get paid.
To discuss your wages with your coworkers.
Tell them,
and there's
Erica.
a reason to do it. There's a reason to do it. We're only going to get better pay. We're only going to get better things if we talk amongst ourselves. We're transparent and we fight for better opportunities, pay, and equality. I mean, I don't understand, especially when it comes from a nurse, don't discuss that. So no, travel nurses, we don't just compare what we get paid. We pull out our contracts and we put them side by side.
Line by line.
Oh, yeah.
Recruiters and agencies, yes. We put our contracts side by side. And you're right, Erica. We go in a red pen and line by line, question mark.
I love
Absolutely.
it. I love it.
Oh, it's true, because I'll get a screenshot from Traveler A.
That's like
from Traveler C. I'm like, how the hell did you get this? I don't even have access to this. Yeah, but that's really, that is the best. If there's a pay discrepancy between two travelers at the same location, same job, same agency, that's really the best way to go about it, is like, why am I getting this, but they're getting that? And having contracts or work agreements compared. Now we have access to that stuff. Like if they're under the same roof, I'm going to be able to see your colleagues' information. So I'll know exactly what they're getting. I'll have access to all their documentation. But the fact that you guys have compared them together is very powerful, because there's really no rebuttal to that. At this point, the agency has to make a decision on whether they're going to match it or not.
I love that you're being transparent with that, because the normal answer from previous recruiters I've had would be, you should never discuss your contract. And I laugh.
Because that protects
I laugh
them.
in their face on the phone. Yeah, I'm just like, are you for real? Of course, that's the first thing I'm going to do when I get on assignment.
Without transparency, it allows people to stay in power, and have control. And so with transparency, that stuff kind of goes away, and we get down to the heart of the issue, and whether you're willing to either meet in the middle somewhere or do the right thing. But without transparency, none of that will be able to happen.
And like you said, Erica, it is a federally protected right.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get into the next part of the podcast, let's take a moment to hear a word from our sponsors and get into our problem of the week. Problem of the week. Erica, did you know that our good friends at Stink Bomb Odor Blocker are offering 20% off this whole holiday season through Christmas by using the holiday promo code Uncorked20? And these Stink Bomb little stocking stuffers are amazing. There's so many different gifts. Tell them about it.
Yeah, they're perfect. I actually gifted all the nurses on my team with a pack of these because working in hospice, we are exposed to some pretty interesting smells. And this is a convenient, tiny little lip balm size product that fits in your pocket, and it's clear, and you just dab it under your nose. It maintains patient dignity. It's better than using room sprays and having to use masks and making the patient feel bad, and it blocks all of the terrible odors.
Yeah, and I love the little lanyard that they've got that you can just use, and it says "Smell you later." It's so adorable. I would be thrilled to get one of these as a little nurse stocking stuffer. So head to stinkbombodorblocker.com and don't miss out on the 20% off holiday code Uncork20. So the problem of the week, and I would like Andrew and Marian, feel free to weigh in on the problem of the week. They're a nurse in Florida who's trying to organize a union. I've been trying for 6 months. I got a good group of people together, but they seem to lack motivation. I'm not sure if it's them or the union I'm trying to work with. I sometimes even feel very out of the loop because there's very little communication between the nurses regarding the organizing. I wonder if the lack of connection with the other nurses who are working on this is part of the issue. Others seem to be much more involved with organizers handing out info in the parking lots, having Facebook groups to keep everyone in the loop, and having meetings with the organizers. The other unions just seem much more involved and better at connecting with people. We have none of that, but I'm not sure that it's because we are in very early stages of unionizing. Is it worth contacting another union? I was thinking maybe Teamsters. Any insight would be incredibly beneficial. So I guess it sounds like the union they're trying to organize with sucks. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
And there's not a lot of information. I don't know what stage they're at or anything, but you're not tied to any one union. And so in the early stages, I always tell people, just Google unions near me. You know, there are nurses that belong to all manner of non-nursing unions, like aeronautics, teachers unions, all sorts of things. So you just can cold call any union in your area and see if they represent healthcare workers or if they're open to representing healthcare workers. You can also go to National Nurses United. They've got a great thing set up on their website. I think it's nationalnursesunited.org. And you just fill out like a 5-6 question questionnaire, and an organizer will contact you and kind of walk you through. I know they'll walk you through the steps. But yeah, I mean, just like you go and shop for, I don't know, an attorney, a doctor, whatever, you might need to talk to 2 or 3 different ones and see if you get a good feel for one or another. Yeah, you're not tied to them if you're in the early stages, but I would at least first have that open, honest discussion with the union and say like, hey, I feel like I'm out of the loop. What's going on? I don't know if this is a good fit. See what they say, you know, but also keep in mind, if you haven't even like signed the cards yet, you don't have the requisite percentage of signed interest cards, the union is not officially involved yet. Like that's all 100% the employees doing that. They can kind of advise you from afar. Sign the damn cards.
Right, Erica,
but they're not officially involved yet. Yeah, that's the lesson. Sign the cards always. But you guys have anything to add to that?
No, I think you're spot on. Without divulging too much of my behavior on certain assignments when it comes to organizing, but I would say you're 100% right? Unions are only as strong as its participants. And if you haven't signed the cards and you don't have the numbers, they're not legal. They can't do anything really other than try to do exactly that, advise you from afar. So for the person with the problem, make sure that everyone understands that, because it is new for you guys. So you are kind of, you're wading through the muck, and it's the blind leading the blind. If you feel that the union you're presently like courting isn't connecting enough, then absolutely, look for another one. It could be the Teamsters. It could be
AFL-CIO.
That's it. I'm going to give a shout out to them. I'm going to give a shout out to a union that I love, and that's the Alaska State Nurses Association, or the Alaska State Nurses Union. They are excellent, and I believe that one is their umbrella. So maybe go contact somebody at that umbrella and see if they connect more with you. And that's because that union, in particular, has even been supportive of travel nurses who aren't even represented by them. If you need one that connects, just get another one, but make sure that the nurses you're talking to understand that they have to stay involved and they can get this done. New Orleans, right? I think they went
Yep,
under a National Nurses United. I mean,
they did.
Louisiana, my old
Yeah,
home state,
that was a
and they're
huge win.
unionizing.
Yeah, and the
Yes,
Teamsters are
good
great
job.
too. The person mentioned the
Yep,
Teamsters, they obviously
yep.
just organized almost 10,000 nurses from 9 different hospitals. So yeah, I mean, like, just reach out and get a feel. But you're right, the union is only as strong as its members. And in the beginning, it's really only up to the workers, the employees, not the union. So,
Perfect answers. Thanks, guys.
all right, should we get back into questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Travelers often face unsafe working conditions such as floating to units outside their expertise without prior agreement or higher patient ratios or heavier acuity than the permanent staff. Andrew, I think we all know agencies don't bite the hand that feeds them, but how do you, as a recruiter, support travelers who experience unsafe working conditions or are retaliated against for speaking up and fighting back?
Ooh, yeah.
I love his oof every time.
I
Like,
know. He's
oh.
always like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew, how do you deal with that?
It's a tough one, right? So here's what I'd say to if you're put into a bad situation, refuse that bad situation. You act within the scope of your license or where you feel comfortable. If you're put in unsafe situations, say something. Don't take it willingly. If a person gets into a situation, let's say, what would be a common one that I hear about? Floating to somewhere outside of their scope of practice. Say like I don't know, a PCU nurse expected. This is extreme, but a PCU nurse expected to take a vented patient in ICU. Obviously, that has never been vented to train. Doesn't know anything about sedation. First things first is I would notify the charge. I would notify the house supervisor and rectify that as fast as humanly possible.
Right.
Agencies, I know we're there's been some heavier topics that may not shine a positive light on agencies, but we honestly try to fix that situation. But it really happens at the unit level between the leadership there, the manager, the charge, the house. And that's where I recommend people to start right away, because you're on the unit, you know the situation, and so you need to tell them what you're comfortable with. And if for some reason the facility continues to put them in those really precarious situations, oftentimes the agency's client manager or their clinical liaison will work with the hospital to say, listen, Marian is being put in this situation. She's very uncomfortable with it. Can we get her, find a way to resolve the issue, whatever that might be. Let's say that's for whatever reason that doesn't happen. It continues to happen. Then the agency is going to give that traveler the blessing to get out of there. Give her 2 weeks notice or less, and just get out of there, and we'll help you find another situation. So there's actually quite a bit of advocacy on the agency front. It's just the agency is pretty powerless to really enact unit level changes. That's really the prerogative of the leadership there. And we really do try to advocate for people.
But what if it's in the contract, that they can only float to whatever, PCO, med tele, whatever, and they're trying to send them to L&D? Like, do they not have to contractually abide by that? Can you not enforce that?
I don't think we can enforce anything on a hospital system. They're going to do whatever the hell they want to do. I think that I think contract is, and this is a little bit beyond perhaps like my scope. They are called contracts, but they're actually labeled employment agreements
Yeah.
and travel agreements,
It's
and
bullshit
so
too.
and that's
It is.
Hey,
That's been a problem for a lot of travelers.
Yeah, so those allow a lot more flexibility to a working arrangement than say a true contract, is my understanding. Now, again, I'm not an attorney, I don't really know, but I think we can encourage a hospital system to honor their word that, hey, you said that you're not going to float Marian to ICU, but you continue doing it. I think there's conversation at that point, if they continue to do it, that we're just going to pull our traveler and perhaps help you find someone else that you need. But at the end of the day, the hospital is going to do whatever the hell they want to do, despite what's in these so-called contracts.
All right. Well, we're going to take a little turn here into a different question. We're going to get off
It
that.
doesn't get any brighter or lighter or sunnier. No.
I don't know. This is another good one because it involves gossip and heated nurses. Yeah. Marian, have you experienced animosity from permanent staff ever when you are on assignment? And can you tell us why, from your perspective, does this happen? I can only imagine. I as a staff nurse, I can probably tell you why, but I want to hear from you what your thoughts are on that.
So I'd like to begin this by saying, when I explain or share a situation where there was animosity, I'm not saying everyone at facility A, is horribly toxic or hostile, so I don't want to get in a situation where somebody's like, well, I'm not that kind of nurse. Well, clearly I'm not talking about you. So no, you're not.
Don't take it personally, Karen.
Don't take
She's
it
not
personally,
talking
Karen,
about
please.
you.
Yeah. Yes. A lot of animosity. And that's interesting because, like I said, a lot of us go into traveling because we were trying to leave toxic nurse environments. And then we go into traveling where there's a lot of toxic nurse, vibes being thrown our way. Now, that just to say, I have worked at some excellent travel-friendly places, and I love them. And I typically will extend for as long as possible when I do work at those places. But yeah, by and large, and I was a staff nurse, obviously, before I became a traveler. And so the big one that, there is a lot of, they're not happy that we're there and probably not performing at the level that they're able to perform within a hospital that they know so much better than we do. And yet we're getting paid, quite a bit more money. And, as a staff nurse who worked in a hospital that utilized travel nurses, though, I guess it's just keep your critical thinking cap on, for the love of sanity, nurses. You need to direct your anger at your administration, not at the travel nurse. Okay. Your hospital is not adequately staffing you. They're not providing you with the resources you need to deliver safe, quality care. Now, I'm there to fill a hole, so to speak. Okay. I'm not going to be as well oriented to your hospital as you are. And this might come as a surprise to some nurses. I don't know why, but it does. Your hospital does things this way. 12 other hospitals do things differently. Okay. So your way is not the highway. So when a traveler comes onto your unit and asks you what you might think is a stupid question, something like, how do you manage? And I'm an ICU nurse. So my questions would be like, how do you manage your heparin drip protocols? Does pharmacy dictate that? Is it physician dictated, or am I going to have a standing nurse, protocol? Or how do you manage your insulin drips? And then what normally will happen is they'll be like, are you sure you're an ICU nurse? Did you get your RN license?
Because
out
they've
of a
only
Cracker
ever
Jack
worked
box?
at that one place and they have no idea that things are handled differently place to place. That's one of my pet peeves as well.
Oh my God. And I could have worked 3 different contracts at 3 different hospitals in a row, and each one does things differently, And so, and I'm going to ask those questions because I want to practice safely. I want to know the answer quickly so that I don't have to bother you, with questions. I want to be able to get in there and perform adequately in a way that doesn't disrupt your unit's, environment. And there is a reason we get paid more than you. We have to duplicate expenses. Number one, and it is expensive to pay a mortgage and rent in the place that we go. And we do need to make some off, on top of that. Otherwise, there is no incentive to leave our comfortable homes, to leave our families and friends behind, go to a place we've never been, learn how to navigate it, and then get virtually no training or orientation to hit the ground running with a bunch of staff nurses that are mad that I can afford to buy travel nurse wine and not budget wine, I'm just kidding. But
that makes all the difference.
But no, so that's kind of it. We're all working in an environment where we are actually all suffering. And travel nurse or staff nurse, I'm held to the same, scope of practice, the same laws, the same regulations, all of that as you are. The difference is I'm coming in quickly, knowing no one, with no training, and the expectations are high, and the resentment over the fact that I'm getting paid more than you is there. And I understand doesn't feel good to do a job and be able to do it better than this traveler next to you. But we are there just filling a hole. And if you want that to change, if you don't want travel nurses to exist anymore, then you better organize a damn union, okay? And start demanding higher pay and better working conditions. You better be doing something and holding your administration accountable. It's not productive, to put the animosity towards us. But I do understand it, Jessica. I do understand it because I was a staff nurse, and damn if they didn't piss me off. But what made me angry, and this is what I try not to do as a traveler, what made me angry as a staff nurse, it was almost this air of, and travelers, we do this, of just kind of rubbing our noses in it, a little bit about just how better off, financially.
Is that a coping mechanism, though, because of all the animosity?
It could be. Now, I don't do that. I don't actually do that unless I'm talking about wine. Then I like to crack jokes because I'm a wine snob. But I was a wine snob when I was
went
unemployed.
wine shopping with you. You are a wine snob.
I knew I liked you for a reason, Marian.
We have good taste, And I don't know. Sometimes people just suck at the end of the day. Trying to figure out why they're doing the things that they do. Like, I would not sit there in an environment where staff nurses are already miserable because they're underpaid and under-resourced. And even if they're treating me, kind of crappy, my way of fighting back is not going to be to remind them how much more money I'm making.
Right.
I'm going to remind them, hey, it's not my fault that I'm here. All right. I understand your resentment, but you need to go get mad at your administration because they suck. They are not paying you a livable wage. They are not paying you how much, you deserve. And incidentally, if it sucks that bad here, come over here and I'm going to talk to you about travel nursing.
There you go.
Let's get you signed up. Leave your hospital.
Yeah. I'll throw this question out to both of you guys. What can travelers do to be prepared in case of a contract cancellation? Do you have any advice? Do they have any recourse?
So traveling is by default pretty risky. Cancellations aren't nearly as common as what people perceive them to be online, or they're mentioned. For instance, I probably signed well over 100 people, and at this point over the last 3 years, maybe even 150. And I think I've had a true cancellation where the facility says, "Yeah, our needs have changed. You're done." Based upon census, for instance, it's like a handful or less. But because it's a baseline risk that you take as a traveler, it just doesn't have nearly as much stability as a staff job. You should have a backup plan. And I always recommend people have at least a PRN position somewhere where they can pick up shifts right away. So that way the gap of employment isn't such a financial devastation. Some people really put all of their eggs in the travel basket, and then the worst thing happens, they get canceled for whatever reason, and then they're kind of SOL because staff and per diem jobs, they take months potentially to finally come through.
Marian, do you have anything to add? Any advice? Has that happened to you?
Yes. So the cancellations are not as frequent as people who are in the groups like the Gypsy Nurse online Facebook group would have you believe. I swear to God. Anytime I check in there, you think travelers are getting canceled, left and right. And travelers, we're people, which means that we might be prone to telling stories. But you would literally think that cancellations are just happening all the time. Since 2015, I have been canceled luckily, I hadn't gotten on the road, but I was canceled right before I was getting on the road to go, to a job site. That was across the country. But, thank God that I was canceled before I got on the road. And so I just picked up shifts, in state. Yes, you have recourse when you are wrongfully. Now, people, they make this mistake. And can I just tell you, if you ever just want to sit in one of those online support groups and see the absolutely horrific legal advice that nurses hand out to each other. Okay.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And none of them are experienced or have the credentials to even hand out that advice, but they'll say, my brother's uncle's cousin, friend, Sonny, who was, a bankruptcy attorney says, and I'm like, now what the hell do you think your uncle's cousin, brother, whatever, Sonny, who's a bankruptcy attorney, knows about labor law?
Right.
Nothing. Okay.
Right.
So, and people get confused because they're going to tell you that we work in at-will states and at-will contracts.
Don't even get me started.
Right. Because although that may be true,
49 states are at will.
Yeah.
Let it go, guys. Let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. If you are terminated for engaging in protected concerted activity as outlined by the National Labor Relations Act, you are federally protected. It is against the law, and voicing safety concerns, because when we work in unsafe environments, it also jeopardizes our license. So we are engaging in protected concerted activity almost, if not every shift of every day of our lives, right? And even as a traveler, you cannot be, well, I say this could change. And we're not going to get into politics, but the political landscape could change this. So be aware of that. But they cannot terminate you for that. And if they do, your first call should be to the NLRB. You should be filing a complaint. Okay. I did, and I won. So just keep that in mind. And we'll get into that on a later podcast. So I have done that, but luckily it doesn't happen as much as people would have you believe, And I just, listen, travel nurses, you make enough money, you should have a savings. Have a savings.
A little emergency fund just in case. Yeah.
And a Louis Vuitton.
And I don't even have a Louis Vuitton. I'm not one of those travelers, right? But
she's got the wine.
I've got the wine. That's what it is. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Spend your money where
Actually,
it counts.
I could probably own Louis Vuitton if I didn't spend so much on wine, to be honest with you. No, I'm just kidding. I never made that much money.
That would be nice, though. All right. To both of you guys, here's a question for both of you. What about 48 to 60 hour per week contracts? Are they worth it, or are they losing out on pay? What do you guys think about those types of contracts?
All right. And Andrew can probably, from your standpoint, get into the money on it. But first of all, I think we have to face that. Our American work culture is so toxic. Mm-hmm. We spend a lot of time working our asses off to make the people at the top a lot of money. And it does not trickle down. But we think that if we keep breaking our backs to do this, and we spend less time with our friends and families, and we spend less time pursuing a healthy, work-life balance, and we just keep slugging away and working, that we're going to get a piece of that billionaire pie. And let me tell you, that is not how it works. We're not going to get a piece of that billionaire pie, right? And there's just this pervasive idea in America, in our country, of the American dream, where anyone can achieve this extraordinary wealth through hard work, and it's very rare that in fact that actually happens. But where I have an issue with it in healthcare is study after study has shown that excessive work hours leads to unsafe patient conditions. And I don't care who you are, because I see it in the travel nurse support groups all the time, where they're like, well, I can work it. I'm physically capable of doing it. And I'm just like, you're going against evidence-based studies that have shown that 48 to 60 hours, especially the 60-hour ones, put patients at risk and increases risk of medical errors. So let's just be honest with each other. You physically can't do it. You're not performing at 110%, once you get past. Our bedside jobs are physically and mentally exhausting. So just be honest. You're going after the money. Or you think you are, but Andrew's probably going to tell you why you're in fact losing money. So you're not as smart as you think you are when you sign this contract.
Andrew looks like he's in deep thought over there.
I know the whole time Andrew's weighing it. Do I want to say? Do I?
It depends on how you look at it. So the upside to a 48-hour guarantee assignment is you have a guaranteed 48 hours of pay per week, assuming you work it, assuming you're not canceled. There's a pro to that, right? The downside is what travelers may not realize is if you do a 48-hour guarantee, you're going to make true time and a half. So whatever that is, whatever your regular hourly rate is, let's say it's $20, it's going to be 30. That is how 48-hour, and the reason for that is so that agencies maintain their profit margins. Is the bottom line there. So if you can't work in a really high overtime rate in a 48-hour guarantee assignment. So pro is you get guaranteed hours. Downside is those overtime hours you work aren't going to have those really delicious overtime rates that you would see on a 36-hour guarantee. So the downside is on a 36-hour work week is you may not have access to picking up extra shifts because the hospital's cracking down on overtime, whatever. But the upside is when you do, you're going to have that $80 an hour overtime when your regular rate is 20. So there's drawbacks and pros to both. If it were me, and knowing what I know now, I would do a 36-hour work week, get that delicious overtime rate. And what hospital system is actually adequately staffed? Basically none of them.
None.
So the likelihood of you having access to an extra shift is high. So
Yeah.
that way you can get that true nice overtime rate that you should be getting.
Okay.
And I don't, and let me preface this. Like, if you work the way that they schedule you, a lot of times travelers like block schedules. So let's say you do your 3 in a row, and let's say you take a day off, and you're recharged, and you want to pick up the following day. I've done it, so I'm not knocking picking up the overtime, but I only do it if I truly feel rested and that I can, do my job. But I want to make sure there's some clarity in everything Andrew just said. I don't think a lot of travelers realize this, and I didn't realize it until I did my own research. But we have a bill rate, right? And then there's an overtime bill rate, and it's completely separate. So when we're talking about bill rates on this contract, there is like an overtime bill rate. So let's say I'm working and it says that my overtime is going to be $60 an hour. And I'm like, yeah, I definitely want that overtime, right? Holiday pay, whatever it is. But the bill rate to the hospital for that overtime is probably like 150 or something. I'm just throwing that number out there. I don't know how accurate that is. But in other words, so there's a bill rate specific just to overtime. And I don't think a lot of us travelers, are aware of that. And of course, this is, another way agencies protect, their profit
So
or
wait,
what
that
have you.
means it would change your hourly rate. It wouldn't be like what you would think it would be. It would decrease your overtime rate.
So the way for me, it took me a while to really understand like who dictates those rates and stuff like that. And so when I came into this knowledge from a previous recruiter who has long left the business, that they do a separate rate. So I think I'm cashing in on $60 overtime when actually the bill rate, to the hospital that's being charged is 150, something like that. It's kind of like, it makes me wonder if I were to say, Andrew, so let's say my next phone call with my recruiter if and when I take another travel contract, because I'm at a point in my life where I might just, do something else entirely. But so let's say I'm like with my recruiter and I'm like, hey, I see my overtime rate here is $80. That's awesome. How much are you actually charging the hospital?
You'd never know. They'd never tell you. Honest to God. But what you just said, Marian, is 100% true. I wouldn't say every single deal has a true overtime bill rate. Overwhelmingly, it does. So let's say 10% of the time, the bill rate for your regular hours worked and your overtime hours worked is the same. The other 90%, there's usually some type of percentage increase. So usually how it works is, let's say the bill rate was $100 an hour, just for simplicity. What it's called is an OT multiplier, overtime multiplier. So they will multiply that that regular hourly rate. Usually it's like 1.1 to 1. At the high end, it's like 1.5. So in that instance, I believe the overtime bill rate would be $150 that you mentioned, Marian. So yes, it is very possible that you could be getting paid $80 an hour, and the agency could be billing $150, and that they would be keeping the $70. So I don't know, nurses, how does that feel?
Not
I
fair.
mean, it's just, the lack of, the lack of transparency, there's a lot of frustration and especially right now, just, the rates aren't where they need to be. So, the agency is holding on in every way possible to every dime. And I feel like we're getting the short end of the stick. And the fact that we're seeing travel nurses go back to staff right now, I'm like, how bad does that have to
left
get?
and right.
In my opinion, personally, I think that if a nurse or a clinician is willing to pick up overtime, then the agency's already made a good chunk of the money. They made it from the base amount of billable hours, 36, 40, whatever that is. If a traveler is if they're going above and beyond to do overtime, they should be making a majority of that overtime bill rate, whatever that may be.
Yes.
Simply because of all of those reasons that you just described. It's harmful on your body, it's backbreaking, it increases patient risk. They're taking a higher risk themselves on their licensure for those reasons. I mean, all of these things. If it should boil down or trickle down to the clinician is the bottom line.
Okay, for somebody, I'm going to put this in layman's terms here because I've never done travel. So this is where my non-understanding comes in. Let's say I'm a staff nurse, okay, and I normally make $30 an hour, okay? I would think that when it's overtime, I'm getting time and a half, then that would be $45 an hour, okay? Are you saying if I was a travel nurse and the bill rate was different, instead of that $45 an hour, it would actually be $43 or $42 an hour because the bill rate is different? How is this that it's different for a travel nurse when it's overtime if you're comparing apples to oranges? Are they making not time and a half? Like, is it not time and a half technically?
They're making true time and a half. Whatever. Yeah. So if it's $30 an hour, you're going to get at minimum 45.
Okay.
Most of the time, to incentivize overtime, an agency will bump that up, not from 45 to maybe 75, to give it a little more meat on the bone, incentivizing overtime. But the reality is the agency could be billing for significantly higher than that. So they may be billing the the organization.
I understand now. So they're taking away from what potentially you could actually have a higher hourly rate. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Now agency is getting the lion's share.
Now, and that would not be disclosed in their contract because.
Oh no.
We don't know the bill rates.
I get it.
Oh, no.
You don't know the bill rates. You don't have the overtime multipliers, and I'm pretty sure the contracts between what we're describing here is pretty. Let's just say secretive information. The contracts between the agency and the MSP actually prevent the agency from disclosing that, is my understanding. I've not seen that contract, but that's been part of conversation I've had with client managers.
Would you guys like to stick around for our Enema of the Week award?
Hell yes.
Enema of the Week.
So this week's Enema of the Week award is brought to you by our sponsor, Happy Bum Co., a leader in at-home enema solutions. I know, it's great.
Everybody loves that. We have an enema company
sponsoring the Enema award. All the research coming out now about the connection between gut health and your other body systems and numerous diseases is fascinating. The gut has its own nervous system that contains over 1 million neurons, and it's so important to pay attention to your body and things like bloating and constipation.
That's why I found this amazing company called Happy Bum Co. They're changing the way people think about gut health. They've created an award-winning coffee enema kit. It's all natural, and I actually already have mine right here.
Where can people go to find it?
You can go to happybumco.com and use code Nurses Uncorked for an additional 15% off your first bundle.
Okay, so this week's award goes to someone by the name of Teresa, who in an online, coincidentally, travel nurse group on Facebook had some comments about me. I know. About me that include, I'll just read some of them. She is trying to gain popularity on social media by going to these strikes and essentially being a legal liaison for nurses. She does not have legal authority, nor do I believe she's in it for the nurses. And then went on to say, I reported her page for hate speech. So this goes to Teresa, because let me just say that I've been going to nursing strikes long before you ever saw me on social media. So I'm not doing that for clout. I'm doing that because I care and I love it. Love nothing more than to see nurses being empowered and taking action. And I have never claimed that I was a legal expert. And anyone that has ever had a consultation with me will tell you that that's one of the first things I say is you need to find an attorney, and you need to go see a labor attorney, an employment, whatever. But I always do that. So no, I don't have legal authority and never claimed that I did. And thank you for putting in writing that you reported my page for hate speech, because that's very helpful, Teresa. So
and Teresa, it sounds like you have a stick up your ass and that you could use an enema.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it might help you get the stick out of your ass.
It might help.
That's all I have to say about it. Because Andrew's going to die.
on a hunch, I went and looked at my Facebook messenger messages, and she had actually reached out to me on several occasions for advice about things like not getting breaks and how to report to the labor board and, get this, seeking legal representation. And I answered her questions and tried to help. And then she went and publicly, tried to, what's it called? Disparage me.
I'd like to address your Enema of the Week award person in case they hear this. Nurses, it is a toxic industry. And it's not just because we're getting it from administration. Unfortunately, we do it to each other. We could achieve so much more, not just for us, our industry, but also our patients, if we stop tearing each other down. Erica, Jessica, influencers that are out there bringing attention to the issues. It is so important. We need people like this on our side, and what they do and what they bring to the table is valuable. There are a lot of issues we wouldn't be aware of if they weren't talking about it on their podcast or on their separate accounts. It just wouldn't exist. They're advocates for our industry. So questioning and tearing people down like that in a public forum, I mean, it's just petty, toxic nursing at the end of the day. You could have reached out and had a conversation. You could have asked Erica, who she is and what she does. There was a better way to handle this. And, it sucks that you got the Enema of the award, but there's a reason, I guess.
But at least you got an award, Teresa. At least
yes,
you got an award.
Yeah. So let's try to do better,
We had no idea there was going to be this much information to cover. Oh my gosh, this is going to have to be a second part. I don't know, maybe a third part. So stay tuned, you guys, next week for this really important conversation on the travel nurse industry.
Yeah, Andrew, Marian, I'm sure you guys are willing to continue this conversation, right? And be a part of this next segment. So let's do it.
Yeah, for sure.